Hello, Gary Simon of DesignCourse.com. Today's Easter, so I thought I would do a relevant project in Blender and show you how to create and design a label around a realistic egg. Alright, so if you've never used Blender before, this would be a good tutorial for you. Blender, of course, is a free 3D application. You can download at blender.org, and it's only about 50 megs, so it's very quick. And I'll try to make this as easy as possible for you to follow. It's just an egg shape, so it's not that advanced. So yeah, check out DesignCourse.com if you haven't yet, and subscribe here at YouTube. Okay, so if you've never used Blender before, basically the way you select objects is, by default, is to right-click them. And to move around in the viewport, you can use your middle mouse button or third mouse button. And to zoom up, you just use your scroll wheel. And to pan, you hold Shift and that same middle and third mouse button. Very easy. So it'll take a little while to get used to. Just learning how to move around. It's just a matter of muscle memory and repetition. So I'm going to file new, reload the startup file so we're looking at the same thing. And so obviously the first question you have to ask yourself, what is the basic shape that we're starting with? And that is not a cube. So we'll hit delete and then enter. So this little thing here, it looks like a crosshair. It's called the origin point. And basically wherever that is, and you can left click to specify where it goes, that's where the object that you're about to add will be placed. So we're going to leave it right there and not click anything. So Shift A will bring up this menu. So Shift A, we're going to add mesh and a UV sphere. Okay. And off the back, I'm going to leave it at 32 segments, ring 16, size 1. And what I want to do now is, if we hit 5 on the number pad on your keyboard, you'll see right here, by default, we're currently into perspective mode. That means, this is based on a realistic 3D perspective view. If we hit 5, we'll see things kind of change a little bit, and it's changed to the orthographic mode. And that makes dealing with modeling in general very easy. So hit 5, you can toggle between those two options. So we want to go to stick with the ortho mode, and I'm also going to hit 1 on the number pad, and that will get us to the front view. Alright, so I'm going to zoom up here with the scroll wheel, and right now we're in object mode. You have also edit mode. Usually you're switching a lot between both of these modes, and object mode allows you to do things like scale an object, rotate it, move it around, but edit mode gives you a further amount of control, and you can switch between those two, by the way, by hitting tab. And so now what we want to do, obviously an egg is not a perfect sphere, so we want to scale it, but only on the z-axis. So if you hit S on your keyboard, that allows you to scale something, but it's proportional by default. But you can specify either X, Y, or Z. If we hit X, we can make it this way. Y is, well, you can't really tell from this angle. I'm going to hit undo, Control Z. But to go S, we want to do on Z. So S and Z, and right around there looks pretty accurate. And so now, when it comes to an actual egg shape, usually on the bottom it's a little bit thicker than it is on the top. So basically what we want to do is just select this initial ring here. So I want to turn on this button. So what this does is, let's say for example I'm going to hit A to deselect all, and that, by the way, will allow you to toggle between selecting all or none. I'm going to hit B. Now B is kind of like, if you've ever used Photoshop, it's kind of like the I guess you could say the lasso tool. And then if you just left click and drag out, it'll let you select. But if we turn and we look around in this view, we'll see it only selected the visible vertices. So hit 1 again to get to front view, hit A. If you turn this on, hit B again. Now it lets us select everything. So that's kind of important. All right, so what we want to do is only select this upper edge, I guess you could call it. So what you would do is right click and hit Alt like that, and it selected all the top ones. And so if we hit 1, and now we also turn this on, proportional editing, we want connected, and we hit S for scale, we can see this circle around it. You can control the diameter with your scroll wheel on your mouse. So if you turn this up roughly quite high, you'll see that it gives us the desired shape at the top. All right, very simple. And that concludes the modeling portion. So yeah, very simple. So now what we need to do is, I'm going to go back to tab to object mode. I'm just going to drag this up here. Now by default, we want to turn on smooth shading, because right now we can see all these individual faces based on the lighting. So the way you do that, so over here we have shading, we have smooth flat. Right now it's on flat, you hit smooth. Now the damn thing looks smooth. Awesome. So now let me, I'm going to drag this out. If we click over here, we can add a subdivision surface on the modifier. So add modifier, subdivision surface. I'm going to make mine just 3 for the view and the render. The view is this. So the view would be if we selected, right now we're on solid by default. If we go to rendered, it'll show us what everything looks like when it's rendered by default. Pretty ugly right now, but that's expected. So now if we go back into edit mode, hitting tab, now we have to do a UV, we have to unwrap it. So basically, when it comes to unwrapping, there's a lot of experimenting basically. So let me just show you what I mean. If you left click and drag left, we'll split these 2 windows, and by default it's whatever this is over here. So over here we can change the mode, or what's displaying over here. So we have all these options. If we change this to the UV image editor, change to this grid square looking thing. So I want to go to image and new image, because by default this is based on 1024 by 1024. We want to make our width 2048 by 2048, and that's basically doubling it. And go ahead and hit OK, and you can just use your scroll wheel to zoom out to get everything in view. And we're going to go ahead over here, hit A, and then A again to select everything. Oh, I should have done that initially when everything was selected. Oh, that's no big deal. All we have to do is go to image, new image, 2048, 2048, hit OK. All right, real quick, I had to pause. I had to mess with something. U, and if we get U and reset, and then go to U and unwrap, or U Smart UV Project, we'll see all the different ways that it basically unwraps this UV over here. And you'll see that, you know, it would be difficult if we took this into Photoshop and tried to wrap like a label or a decoration around it, because they're all separated. So usually sometimes it's a matter of just experimenting with how this unwraps based on these different options. We try a cube projection, that's not going to work. Cylinder projection seems to be the one that worked best for me. But we still have to make some adjustments here, because basically all this square portion in the center is almost everything except for the top. The very top portion are these tiny little things down here, and also the bottom down here. So if we hit A to select all, and we scale this down right around here, and then we also hit S and then scale on the X-axis. S and X, right around there. We should get something that's pretty accurate. Now we have these things hanging off the side over here, so what we can do is hit A and hit B, and just select those top portions and hit G, and then we'll just move this to the top. Come down here, hit A, B, hit G to move, and we'll move these at the bottom. So now if we hit A and then A, we'll see we have everything here basically ready to go. All right, so it doesn't really import. Basically, when we take this into Photoshop, we'll just fill in a flat background color, and that way these will be the same color as whatever the background is. So this is where, inside here is where the label is going to go. All right, so what we want to do now is export this UV layout. So UV, export UV layout, and I'm going to choose just a folder here. I'm going to create a new one called project, create new directory, and my hard drive is going to be a little bit slow. All right, and I'm going to call this what's called UV layout. And this is going to be a PNG. We'll come down here, make sure you turn on all UVs, and the fill opacity basically means the opacity of the UV layout, which is going to put it on one layer. And 2048, of course, by 2048. So export that, and now we're going to step into Photoshop, go to File, we'll open it up. All right, I've selected it here, and obviously this is a pretty big document. We're only at 50%. If you hold Alt and use your scroll wheel, we can zoom out a little bit so we can get it on screen. And let's go ahead and select just like a egg shell color. An egg isn't 100% white. It usually has like a tint of yellow to it. So I'm using F4EE for the color code. Hit OK. Control Shift N for a new layer. Hit OK. And we'll drag it down here. Let's call this background real quick. And fill that in. Okay, so now these UVs basically represent almost the entire, with exception up here and down here, the entire egg. So we don't want the egg to have the label wrapped from here down to here. We want to start off in the middle and give it some, I guess you could say, white space down here and up here. So what I'm going to do is take the rectangle tool. I'm going to use like a blue color. You can use any color you want, obviously, for this. Hit OK. And I'm going to start just roughly maybe right around here. We don't have to be like on the actual edges or anything of those UVs. We just have to make sure we draw outside the right and the left. As you can see, it's just started just outside here. That way you don't have any clipping or anything like that. So I'll just make it right around there. And if you get a stroke that shows up over here, just hit 0. All right, so now what I want to do is just create some designs, basically. You can do whatever you want. There's no right or wrong with this. And I'm just going to take the pen tool, hit Shift left click up there. And then I'm going to duplicate that. You can right click, duplicate layer right there. I've set up a hotkey, Control Shift and D. And just move it over, holding Shift a little bit. Take those two layers, holding Shift, hit Control E to group them, or merge them rather. Duplicate those. And keep doing the same thing throughout all these. So real quickly, just move those over. Take both layers, holding Shift, Control E, Control Shift and D, which I've set up for duplicate layer. Move this over, holding Shift. And let's see how far we have to go. Control Shift D. And we'll come out, leave this one right around there. And if you take your direct selection tool, left click and drag to select it, you can delete any unneeded portions. Let me zoom up here. Just hit the delete keys by selecting those. All right, and I'm going to move this over a little bit and then zoom out. And basically this is going to wrap, so this portion is going to end up touching this portion. And there's going to be a little bit of a gap here, so what we can do is just select all of those. I'm going to Control E to merge them. I'm going to move this over here with my arrow key, and then Control T and then Shift to move that over there to the right. All right, looks pretty good. All right, so now what I want to do is bring that UV portion. I want to, underneath that layer, we'll just call this blue stuff. And then underneath, yeah, we might as well merge those as well too. So Control E. And then underneath this blue stuff layer, we'll go ahead and create a new layer. And I'm just going to come out right around here, holding Alt and left clicking and dragging. I'd say right around there. And I'm going to double click on the foreground color to make it pure white. Hit OK. Control H to get rid of the view. Oh, and also mine is adding a stroke, so I'm just going to change that to 0. And I'm going to take blue stuff, Control-Shift-D to duplicate it, edit, transform, and then flip vertical, and we're going to move it down. And I want to see the bottom of that white portion that we created. Yeah, that's right there. So holding Shift and left clicking and moving it down. All right, so we could take those 3 layers and kind of center them up based on how much space is on top of this portion and beneath this, and try to make them even, basically. All right, so we can experiment, you know, and that this rectangle, we'll just call this white VG, and you can either leave it 100% white if you want, or you can add some type of design inside of it if you want. So if I could duplicate this over here, or double click the right side of the layer, we can bring up the layer styles. We have all these options that we can apply to it. You can give it a gradient, you can give it color overlay, you can give it pattern overlay. And I happen to have some random pattern over here that I thought worked well. And I'm just going to scale this up. And this pattern by default, I do not think comes with Photoshop, so you probably don't have it. I forget which ones do come with Photoshop, but don't worry if you don't have this exact pattern. You can leave it white, or you can add a gradient if you want. And gradients are cool. You can control how the gradient appears. You can have different colors. Make this one white, for example. Make this one, I don't know, blue. You can do a bunch of stuff. So do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to really, it's not a big deal if you can't get this one over here. So I'm going to make an adjustment real quick, color overlay as well, and make this like a blue, and then change the mode. And then come over to pattern layer. I'm just going to mess with this a little bit. Yeah, I think screen works well. All right, so now I'm just going to get the design course DC logo lettermark out, and so I'm going to open that up. I'll include this in the project files if you want to include that. So just Control A, Control C to copy it, and then come up at the top layer, Control V to paste it in, Control T, Shift and Alt. All right, put it right around there, hit apply. And I'm going to give it a color overlay to match that specific color of blue. Hit OK, and then OK. And then I'm going to duplicate it. And just to create some variation, I'm going to go ahead and change this so that it doesn't have a color overlay. And change the layer blend mode by using my down arrow key to where it doesn't show up. It becomes invisible essentially. Double click on the effects, and I'm going to make this a stroke, but also get rid of color overlay, and over here deselect, clip this one right here, and then just select that one. Actually, I may have to adjust this. Oh, the effects weren't showing up, that's why. Oops. Let me go back here to come down. Right there. Okay. Go back to stroke, and then get this color. And I think that looks pretty good right there. Then I'm going to take those two and then just duplicate those. And I want an even amount of space between each one of these. And then I'll take each one, Control T, apply right around there. All right. So that is the actual design that we're going to use. All right. So let me go ahead and save this. I'm going to just go ahead and hit Control Shift Alt and S just for save for web. We can make it a JPG. Quality you can leave high, and save that as diffuse. And we'll come back to Blender, and we're going to change from Blender Render to Cycles Render. And so that's something that is kind of important. I exclusively use Cycles Render. Started using it when there was only Cycles Render, and it just seems as everyone prefers that. So what I want to do now is we're going to change this here to what's called the node editor, and hit N to get rid of that part. And so if we go over here and click on the materials section, we hit new, we'll see these two things showed up, and that basically represents or reflects whatever's selected over here. So what we want to do is change this diffuse to what's called a mix shader. A mix allows you to add two different shaders. So when it comes to like an Easter egg, you have two different types of textures, I guess you could call them. If you're using like a plastic wraparound on the egg, that's usually glossy, and then up here and then beneath that, the egg itself is kind of like a diffuse. So what we'll do is make this top one a diffuse, right down there, and then this one right here will be glossy. All right. So the way you move around in here, of course, everything still applies from here. Shift in that right mouse or middle mouse button. And if we want to see what things look like, we can switch back to rendered. And let's brighten the world up here. So do we take this color and make it white? Now things are starting to look better. I'm also going to switch over here, change to GPU compute. It makes the rendering a lot faster. And if you don't have this option, you just go to File and User Preferences, and you go to System. And if you have a GPU, and I have two GeForce cards, you can specify CUDA, and then you have the option over here for GPU compute. All right, and then also another quick adjustment, I'm going to change samples. 10 is very crappy, or very low rather, but it's very fast. So you see all these little grainy areas. Higher this number for render and preview. Preview is what we're doing right now. We're not actually rendering. So we have two different settings. So the render, you can make that high, like 1,000. Preview, maybe like 100. So now once I change that, you can see got rid of all that graininess. Okay, so now what I want to do, we have to attach our actual image. So if you hit Shift A over here, texture and image texture, you get this little thing. And what we can do is left click and drag this to the color portion of the diffuse. Now it shows up this pink color because there's no image yet. So if I hit open, select my project diffuse, we can now see we have our egg, except it looks washed out. That's because this mix shader has what's called an FAC value, and by default it's at 0.5. So that means it's displaying 50% diffuse, which is only to 50% of this, or a label, and then 50% of this glossy down here. What we can do is just take this, hit Shift D to duplicate it, move it down, and attach this. So now it's showing up a lot better. All right, so another thing I'm going to show you is how to create basically what's called a specular map. Now a specular map allows you to control which portions of the UV that's unwrapped and what we created inside Photoshop are shiny. So this top portion up here, when it comes to an egg, it's not generally shiny. This wrap right here, if you're using a plastic wrap, is shiny. So the way you control that, you can go into Photoshop and you can make sure you can save this. If you want to save this as like a PSD file, we'll call this diffuse. That way you have a backup. Then file, save as, and we'll call this spec, as a specular map. What we can do now is, the specular map is based on black and white values. So all we have to do is create a rectangle, left click, drag, and hold Alt, just the height and the full portion of that label. Let me get rid of that stroke again. And I'm going to make it white. So the white is going to be the most shiny portion, or the glossy portion that gets shown. And everything else, if I hit Control Shift N for a new layer, just beneath that layer, we can make it black. And we can go ahead and delete all the other layers. We don't need them. And that's all we need. So let's go ahead and save that. Control Shift Alt and S is save for web, or just go to File, Save for Web. Save that, and we'll call this spec. All right, now we'll go back to Blender, And we're going to hit Shift A, texture, image texture, open, and where is that at? Spec.jpg. And now we attach it to the FAC value of the mix shader. Now you can't tell too much of a difference, although you can see it's not shiny anymore, but to really show you what this looks like, we'll go ahead and make a quick adjustment. So we're going to add what's called an emission plane. So I'm just going to move this over here to the right temporarily, switch over here to solid, and I'm going to find wherever our camera's at, just kind of click around there for our origin point, Shift A, plane, RX45, that rotates it 45. You know what? I did something stupid. I was still in edit mode when I added that, so it added it as a part of this. That's why it looks like a circle, because of that subdivision surface. Let me hit delete. Hit tab. Now Shift A, mesh in plane. RX45. All right, and if we come around, move it, hit S2 just to make it 2 times as large. And move it out and up here a little bit. Come over to materials, hit new, and select emission, wherever that is. There we are. Emission. Let's make the strength 10. All right, so now if we switch back to rendered, we can see more of this being glossy, but this top portion not. All right, so what we want to do now is we'll drag this back out, and you can control how glossy this is. Right click on the egg by changing the roughness of this glossy portion. So you could see if we make it all the way to 0, it shows like basically a view of that plane. I'm just going to make mine slightly, you know, around 0.1 I think will work okay. Just like that. All right, so we're done with this portion. I'm going to right click and join area and make sure this joins over there. And I want to add a plane now. So I'm going to switch back to solid, click around here for the plane, Shift A, mesh plane, S and 50. So we're going to make it real large. Like right click the egg. Actually, we'll stay with the plane, just move it down. And if we get real close here, we can see we don't want it to be beneath that actual egg. There. All right, so now it's sitting right on there. And if we go back to render, we'll see now we have some nice realistic shadows coming off there. And if we want to rotate this, so right click on it. Now when you're in render mode, it doesn't really show you what you clicked on, but we know we clicked on it because it shows us, you know, our materials over here. RZ, and then now we can just rotate this on the Z-axis. And I'm going to right click on the plane, give it a material, make it white. By default it's diffuse, just right there. Sorry, I had to pause for a second. So now what I want to do is go ahead and duplicate these. So I'm going to switch back to solid, right click on the egg and hit Shift D and hit X for it to be moved. And we can move around and make it right there. And then I'm going to also hit R and we're going to hit Y. Move it on its side, then R and Z. Move it over here maybe. All right, we don't want them to collide into each other. Let me move it out. Now if we go back to rendered, we'll see that we have an egg over there, and we'll do one more. Actually, you know, I kind of want that to be a little bit closer, so let me zoom this out. We get more in view, okay? And then finally, we'll do another one, Shift D, and then X, and R and Z. We'll see maybe the butt end of it. And I want to push this back as well. And move it over here. All right, let's see what that looks like. Got it rendered. Yeah, these need to push down, so all I have to do is just go back to solid, shift and right click both of them, and we can move them down right around there. Hit rendered. I'm going to right click just that one, hit R and Z. Right around there is good. Yeah, I think that is good right there. And I do want to be able to see more of the top because this kind of just blends into the back. So if we right click on the plane and maybe come back down to where it was before, that way we'll be able to see more of the white outline. And if we go up like this, we can get rid of the part where you can see the outside of this plane. What I want to do real quickly, we can set this up in a camera view. So if we hit 0 on the number pad, that'll show us wherever the camera currently is. If I hit the letter N as in nose on the keyboard, we can bring up the properties and turn on lock camera to view, hit N again. And we could set up our camera based on whatever the final scene is that we want to see. So I think maybe right around here is okay. And we'll go here to the rendered tab. I'm going to make the resolution 1280 just by 720. That's the size of my videos that I record. Make this 100% so it actually goes 100% of that. And yeah, we have rendered on 1000. And now I'm going to go ahead and just render this thing. So you come up here and click on render. Wait 1 second. Performance, I want to change the tiles from 64 to 256 by 256. And you could do that if you do have GPU processing. So now I will hit rendered. And now it's going to take a while. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this until it's done. All right, and that is it. So I'm going to go ahead, if you want to save this, hit F3. And I'm just going to call this final render and save image. Come down here, you can specify all your values, and that is it. All right, pretty cool. If this is your first Blender tutorial, hopefully you didn't find it too difficult. I've always found it helpful when instructors will actually do a full tutorial that includes, the rendering and the lighting and the actual, providing an actual real-world project instead of just covering specific features. Anyhow, yeah. So yeah, I'm doing a video tour every day of 2014, and so today's April 20th, and I don't know how many days there have been yet. It's probably like 115 or something like that. So yeah, subscribe to the channel, check out more videos, and check out designcourse.com as well. All right, happy Easter, and I'll see you tomorrow.